Jet, do you know that there are 3 things that I particularly hate?
Really?
Drawing on the wrong layer, flipping the canvas and it's ugly, and Photoshop crashing.
Oh.
So tell me, Jet, why do we have all 3 of them neatly gathered in our
Digital artwork.
Hey there everyone, in this video I will be breaking down this fan art I did of Cowboy Bebop and sharing some of my thoughts surrounding the creative process. And just like everything else, it begins with an idea and a sketch. So, the initial idea for this illustration stemmed from me wanting to practice more character design. And I really like Cowboy Bebop, so I thought it would be an interesting challenge trying to depict all of them standing together, as if they were posing for a photograph. And it's always a tricky thing trying to draw an ensemble cast, so I used lots of movie posters and even band photographs to see how people balance the composition. As always with a large illustration like this, I began with some very basic sketches for thumbnails. Now these are extremely rough, but in this stage I personally don't like spending lots of time detailing. Instead, I'm trying to frame the main elements of the composition, and this included where certain characters were and their poses. So I did a bunch of different explorations and I ended up liking this one a lot, so I took the initial idea and then developed it even further. This next stage includes me blowing up that thumbnail to be the actual size of the illustration, and then I'm basically just adding more details and trying to refine things a little bit. And I end up doing this a couple of times and basically just iterating on it further until I reach the final line art, which you'll see in just a bit. Now, on Instagram, I did get a question about how to draw character likenesses in your own style. Honestly, my first piece of advice when it comes to that is just relieve the pressure of trying to duplicate a character 100% in somebody else's style, just because it's almost like trying to copy someone else's handwriting, so getting rid of that perfectionism makes you feel a lot freer in terms of trying to draw a character. For me, I try and pay attention to things that make a character stand out. So, for example, to understand Spike's face, I did a bunch of these sketches here and just measured out different proportions. But for doing it in your own style, that will actually come fairly naturally. Because when you interpret something like, okay, Spike has a long face, or his hair is big and fluffy, you will end up representing that in your own way. And at this stage, I don't think it's necessarily bad to draw on top of your reference to understand how everything is put together, because you get to see how another artist has depicted this character. But once you have that information, I would really recommend trying to draw it yourself, and you will end up finding something that really does work for you. In my own illustration, I really tried to capture a little bit of the personality of each character. You know, for instance, Jet is all stern looking and maybe a little bit grumpy that he has to be part of this photo. Spike is standing there looking all cool and everything like that with his cigarette. Faye is acting nonchalant and being cute, and she's like pretending that, you know, there's not a camera on her and just, oh yeah, I'm just very candid right now. Ed is super elated with everything. And of course, Ein is just happy being included. So that was probably my favorite part of this whole illustration, honestly. Now, once I finished off the basic sketch, I then cleaned everything up with some tighter line art. And once I had that done, I moved on to the coloring stage. To approach the lighting, I decided that I would start off by creating color flats for all of the characters. So what this entails is just giving everyone a single color and filling their silhouette using the lasso tool. Now, I did this because later on I'm going to add clipping masks on top of this one layer, and this just gives me a base to work from. So if you would like to know more about the lasso tool, I've actually made another video where you can check it out right here. And it's just a short tutorial on how I use the lasso tool. But I also did get a couple of questions for how I approach lighting. Now, in this illustration, I actually hopped over to Blender and downloaded a free 3D model to pose to act as my characters. And I set up a very, very basic block version of the scene, and then I put in a couple of lights, mainly just to see how they would interact with our characters and where the shadows would fall. Now, this ended up being a reference that's going to be used for my final illustration, but it is very handy to see how it would work in 3D first. Going back to the characters' flats, I'll then add some clipping masks and block in the local colors of each character. So basically, local color is the raw form of a color seen under white light, just meaning that it's not influenced by any kind of other lighting or colors in the environment. In fact, this was actually the easiest way for me to approach this kind of noir lo-fi lighting that I had in mind, and it's very similar workflow to cell shading. So instead of jumping in and painting all the complex lights right away, I'm just setting everything up now so I can play around later with multiply layers, and this helps me create shadows and add lights one at a time. I'm going to plug another video I did where I do explain the cell shading technique a little bit more right here, and I might even make a tutorial if there's enough interest, but that being said, Mark Burnett actually has a really amazing tutorial on this, which I'll link in the description below. So after setting up the basic lights, I've now created a new layer where I'm just painting on top of everything else. And this part is fairly straightforward. It's just a matter of painting everything and adding textures and details where necessary. This probably took the longest out of the entire process, so I just kept referring to my references and experimenting with things. And this stage really doesn't take as much brain power as the rest, since I've already figured out my questions like color palette and composition and, you know, the characters' poses and stuff like that. So I'm basically just putting everything together now. As for when I know I'm finished, it's just more of a feeling than anything, so I just paint until I reach that state, or at least when I've hit a wall and I feel like I can't add anything else to the illustration. And one thing I do want to point out is, in this piece, I did include a bunch of little references to the anime throughout the illustration, and one that's quite subtle is the way that I've posed Spike's hand with the cigarette. Bang. There are actually 3 other Easter eggs in this piece, so let me know in the comments if you can spot any more. I think for me, one of the reasons I like Cowboy Bebop so much is just the entire atmosphere of the show. You know, it's got that Blade Runner sci-fi feeling, and it's mixed with cyberpunk and lo-fi, and the writing is really nice as well. I personally watched it quite late compared to when it came out, just because my brother introduced it to me back in 2020, and that's actually when I started watching anime in general. Since then, you know, I've seen a bunch of classics like Attack on Titan and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and Spirited Away and stuff, but you know, if you have any recommendations, just hit it down in the comments below. I'd love to see more. Also, I do feel like there is an elephant in the room, and that has to be Netflix's live-action version of Cowboy Bebop. And you know, okay, this might be sacrilege compared to the consensus I've seen online, but I actually didn't mind it that much. You know, I thought they got the atmosphere and set dressing really well, especially in the first couple of episodes. And I really did like Mustafa Shakir's portrayal of Jet. His voice is amazing, but I did find everything else to kind of be I don't know. Especially like the whole side plot with Vicious and Julia, that was pretty messy.
Mushy mushy.
And I don't think it paid off that well. But still, I am kind of disappointed that it was cancelled, just because I feel like it had potential, man. It was almost there, but it got cancelled. And you know, that's just me. Another question I got on Instagram is about when or where it's appropriate to use traditional art in order to aid your concepting or illustration. To that, you know, it's first of all a really good question, but I would say it's honestly up to you. You know, there is no right or wrong way to create artwork, and you have to do what feels comfortable. And however you like to work is special to you. Each artist has their own process that's unique to them, which is really exciting. You know, in fact, some digital artists will actually draw traditionally in a sketchbook and scan in their line work to the computer or iPad. But on the flip side, some traditional artists use Photoshop as a way to plan out massive oil paintings. And I think as an artist, if you kind of limit yourself based off of medium, you might be hurting your overall workflow. You know, a great example I can think of this is Andrew Tischler, who in my opinion is a contemporary master. And I'm going to link his YouTube channel below if you're curious to see more. But in a few of his videos, he's actually used Photoshop, and he's used it to draw out his composition and nail his colors down before he even uses oils. And it's just amazing and fascinating to see how he puts everything together. And just back to the painting, the post-processing stage, I feel like this is really where everything comes together. So this is just where I've finished painting, and now I'm using the tools in Photoshop to kind of tweak global changes that affect the entire image. And this includes things like overall contrast and color grading, And I can also add things like noise and chromatic aberration, and this just helps remove that overly clean feeling that you sometimes get in digital art. But overall, this entire painting took about 11 hours from start to finish, and honestly it was a really fun challenge to do, and something that I'm not really used to as well, an entire ensemble of characters, and I really wanted to push myself in this one. So, if you like this kind of content, consider subscribing and leaving a comment for any future suggestions you'd like to see. Lately, with my YouTube, I'm trying to make my videos a little bit more entertaining and engaging, so I would really love some input from you guys, just ideas and anything that you think could be cool to add. Until next time, everyone, see ya, Space Cowboy.